Jesse Love continues to be linked to the Wood Brothers for 2027, though could head to Penske in the future as well, and Chris Buescher will return to RFK Racing in 2027. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR number sports to discuss today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. First paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Ankins' 2026 Lee Uena Patriota scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. Truck looks pretty good in my opinion. I do like the colors overall. You've got some nice colors on it too with the white on it. It does look pretty good. Looking forward to the racetrack this week at San Diego. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Nathan Nicholson's 2026 Whelen scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. Kind of similar to what Jesse Love has in the O'Reilly Auto Parts series when he has the alternate white car. Does look pretty good. I think it's a solid looking truck. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Berry's 2026 Motorcraft Patriota scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. I love the stars on the car, to be honest. Everything's not much different from the paint scheme except the stars, but I do think the stars put a really solid and really good touch on this scheme overall. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is the Varscotch 2026, the local PB scheme that we'll see this weekend in San Diego. A lot of different partners on the car for this week. I will say it does look pretty good though, and I think the cars and the car for Alpha Prime looks really solid. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chris Rice 2026 the 250 scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. This truck looks really awesome in my opinion. One of the better Chris Rice paint schemes we've seen ever. The 250 on the front of the truck makes sense, and the red, white, and blue on the side also makes sense with the paint scheme as well, with this being a week at San Diego. Looks pretty good. Looking forward to the racetrack this week. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Alex Bowman's 2026 USO scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. This is one of my favorite Alex Bowman paint schemes of this season so far. I love the USO look, the red, white, and blue on it. It looks really awesome. The colors pop very well on it too. Looking forward to the racetrack this week at San Diego. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Dillon's 2026 Bassero Supreme Lodge Range scheme that we'll see next week at Sonoma Raceway. Car looks pretty good in my opinion. I do love the look of it overall, the Bass Pro, the grayer colors to it. It does pop solidly, and I do think it's a solid looking car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Osbar's 2026 Classic Collision scheme that we'll see next weekend at Sonoma Raceway and other races throughout the 2026 year. Love the colors of this. Really excited to see Classic Collision back in the NASCAR Cup Series. They were, I believe, with Spire Motorsports last year in the Cup Series. This car does look solid, and it does look really good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is John Nemechek's 2027 Mayor scheme that we'll see next year. This is the second paint scheme for 2027 that's been revealed for Nemechek. Rexel also has a paint scheme for next year too. Car looks pretty good in my opinion. Interesting sponsorship for 2027. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Hemrick's 2026 Napa Patriota scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. It kind of looks a little different than the one that Chase Elliott's running this week at San Diego. I do think the red, white, and blue and the Napa colors pop really well in this scheme, and I think it looks pretty good. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cole Custer's 2026 Texas A&M George H. Bush scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego in honor of George H.W. Bush. Interesting stuff. Pretty interesting and pretty awesome Texas A&M scheme overall. This is a definitely good looking car in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jesse Love's 2026 Distributor Patriota scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. Colors on this do work pretty solidly in my opinion with the red, white, and blue and all the other stuff. Kind of a throwback to some other scenes we've seen from RCR. It looks solid. I think it's okay. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Andres Perez Dolores' 2026 Acceptance Patriota scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. I had to make sure this was a new one, and this is a new one for him. We've had a couple different variations of the Acceptance Insurance scheme, but I think this one actually does work in a pretty good way. Looking forward to seeing a racetrack this week at San Diego. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Corey Heim's 2026 Mobile One/O'Reilly scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. For this week, it makes a ton of sense. You've got the red, white, and blue on the car. The O'Reilly Auto Parts actually works really solidly on this one. Now, on top of that, you get some other things that do work pretty good with this car, too. Nice looking car overall. Looking forward to seeing it on the racetrack this week at San Diego. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Hill's 2026 1-800 Pack Rat Patriota scheme that we'll see in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at San Diego. Car's alright in my opinion. Red, white, and blue on there. You got the stars, all that stuff on there. Does look overall pretty good. And there's some good colors on it too. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is John Nemechek's 2026 Drive value scheme that we'll see this weekend at San Diego. I think it's a decent looking car overall. They could have done a little more with this paint scheme in my opinion, but I do think it's good to see drive value back with this team for this year. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2026 Kubota Veterans Honor Scheme that we'll see this weekend out at San Diego. I think this car looks okay. I like the traditional Kubota scheme, but I do think the white actually fits pretty well with this car. The colors do work solidly overall with the scheme. Looks pretty good overall. Looking for us at racetrack this weekend out at San Diego. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the O'Reilly Auto Parts race in Daytona. As it looks like they have a new title sponsor or a returning title sponsor going to this event in Daytona, as it looks like the race is going to be called the Winn-Dixie 250. Winn-Dixie used to be the sponsor of the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race for many years in the mid to late 2000s. Dale Jr. won one of those races when he won the event back in like 2003 and 2004. And we saw a lot of drivers win with the Winn-Dixie sponsorship for, I think, Subway Jalapeno, who came and eventually became the title sponsor of the event. I think it's definitely some good stuff for sure. I'll be interested to see what the logo ends up being. Again, this is what was put on the website. Pretty cool to see Winn-Dixie will be coming in and being the title sponsor for the race at Daytona, looks like later this summer in late August. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Red Bull. As it was announced and confirmed earlier today that Red Bull will be releasing NASCAR-related cans around their two drivers to have the Red Bull sponsorship in NASCAR. Those two drivers, of course, will be Shane Van Gisbergen and Connor Zülch. The release date for the NASCAR-related cans will be about a week or so from now on June 29th. You take a look at these paint cans, which of course they were shown in Dale Jr. Download, which are going to be above Zillage and SVG are going to be on Dale Jr. Download later today when you're watching this video. I think these cans actually look really, really good. I think it's awesome that we're going to, of course, see the both of them have Red Bull this week at San Diego, with it being a massive and huge week. I think it's awesome that we're going to see both these guys have the Red Bull sponsorship. You got SVG that has the gray color, and you have Connor who has the traditional blue color. Both these cars look great, and I think it's awesome that Red Bull's coming in and pretty awesome related cans for the Red Bull sponsorship, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, because we are talking about lap sled in 2026. As was reported by the NASCAR Insights Count earlier today or yesterday, that the lap sled for 2026 for the first 16 races of the year have officially been unveiled. So far, Joe Gibbs Racing this year at Cup has led 1,463 laps. They're the only team this year so far that has led 1,000 laps in the season. Hendrick Motorsports is second with 913. Then you have 2311 Racing with 596. These are the only three teams so far this year that have led over 500 laps of the first 16 races of the year. Team Penske sits at 440, and then RFK Racing only has 254 currently at the moment. The four teams I've talked about, they've been the best. Joe Gibbs Racing, Hendrick, 2311, and Team Penske have all been the strongest organizations so far in the 2026 year. So it's not shocking and surprising to see how dominant they've been on the lap sled total. In other areas, they've been so strong and so good this year. We're probably going to continue leading laps. If I had to make a prediction, Joe Gibbs Racing will reach 2,000 laps before Hendrick gets to 1,500. But Hendrick's catching up a bit, and they're showing a little more speed. But I think JGR will get to at least 2,000 laps before the end of 2026 when it comes to lap sled. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about sellouts. As it was reported by Adam Stern a couple days ago on Monday morning, that apparently, according to him, there have been 4 consecutive NASCAR Cup Series sellouts in 2026 and 4 straight sellouts at Pocono Raceway. If you take a look at all the correlation, these are Amazon races. Of course, the last years have been Amazon races for Pocono, but we've been seeing NASCAR Cup Series uptick when it comes to people going to the racetrack. And I will say there's been a lot of times this year where we've seen a lot of really good attendance so far in 2026. One, there's more interest to go out to the racetrack a lot more. Yes, ticket sales have been definitely going up a little bit, which is why we've been seeing less sales compared to prior years. But we are expecting a huge crowd for San Diego this week, though nothing's been finalized at this point how many people are going to be showing up to San Diego. But I do think it's awesome that we're getting a lot more people showing up to these races and showing up to these events. So I think that's the ultimate goal that NASCAR is looking for currently at the mall right now, is having as many sellouts. And Pocono hosted, I think, over 115,000 people for their event this year. So I think that's why that is a huge and really significant number. So awesome stuff to see nonetheless, and really good that we have had 4 consecutive Cup sellouts and 4 straight sellouts at Pocono in 2026 up to this point. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're unfortunately taking this episode to a sour note, as it was sadly reported by the Scene Vault podcast yesterday that Steve Wade has sadly passed away at the age of 77 years old. The unfortunate cause of death, cancer. Steve Wade, if you do not know, was one of the greatest motorsports reporters out there, one of the greatest journalists. He has been around for a very, very long time, or had been around for a very long time. Was a co-host of the Scene Vault podcast. We'll work with many great journalists in this industry, like your Bob Pockerses, your Jeff Glucks, and other legends of the motorsports world. Worked with Steve Wade over the years. He had a ton of respect for many in the industry, including Mike Joy, among many others, and was not afraid to ask the hard-hitting truth and hard-hitting questions, and is definitely someone who represented journalism in a professional, but asked those honest questions that were needing to be asked. My thoughts and condolences do go out to Steve Wade's family, and I'll continue sending my prayers. It's been a very tumultuous time in this industry with a lot of unfortunate tragedies, including, of course, we found out recently some other ones like Dennis Rybel, who sadly passed away, and, of course, Kyle Busch and Greg Biffle and Ned Jarrett and others who've sadly passed away in the last year or so. It's been a very difficult time. I want to send my thoughts and condolences out to Steve Wade's family, and send my thoughts and condolences out to the journalist industry, because it's a very difficult time for the industry currently at the moment with the unfortunate passing of Steve Wade. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Brad Perez. As it was announced yesterday that Brad Perez is back in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series this weekend at San Diego. He will drive the number 55 for Joey Gase Motorsports this week. Brad Perez has made a few starts so far in the 2026 year. His main focus this year so far has been basically being a substitute driver. He's actually gotten behind the wheel a couple times so far this year. I think once for Young's Motorsports, I'm pretty sure. Now, JG Motorsports, let's be real, they're not one of the fastest teams out there. But I do think Brad Perez is someone who probably could get the best out of equipment if the equipment can hold up. So that's the thing I'm a little bit concerned about for Brad, is equipment holding up going into this week. And you're going to have good equipment, because there's going to be a lot of issues with the track. There's been a lot of bumpy and other conditions that could come into play this week at San Diego. But if Brad can survive, I think a top 25 could absolutely be the goal, because I do think while the equipment does matter a lot, I do think someone like Brad can do a really good job behind the wheel. And I'm definitely excited for Brad, because again, this is a really strong opportunity for him to be racing in this event. I do think he'll have a good opportunity, a solid chance to show what he's capable of because of the equipment that he's in. Hope he can do a good job behind the wheel, because I do like him a lot. Very talented guy, pretty underrated driver, does a lot of simulator work, works with a lot of other teams, and is working as a mechanic, I think, for other teams at this point too. Good to see him getting a shot to drive for JG Motorsports this weekend out of San Diego. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Baltazar Laguzman. As it was announced earlier this evening, the Baltazar Laguzman is back in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series this weekend at San Diego. He will drive the number 42 for Young's Motorsports this week. Baltazar Laguzman attempted to make some starts with the Bear Cope Racing Team earlier this year, but unfortunately, as we know, in a couple weeks into the year, that organization shut down, which canceled his plans to make a few starts with that team this year. Baltazar, I believe, failed to qualify for all the races, or came close to failing to qualify for the race that he entered in 2026. The good news is, similar with Brad Perez, there is no one going home this week, so Baltazar will make one of his first appearances so far in the 2026 year. Realistically, there's no disrespect to Baltazar, but the Young's Motorsports team, their program is not that strong on road courses. And Baltazar, while I think he's an okay road course racer, he's had troubles in the road course races he's entered so far in the last couple of years. I really hope he can do a good job behind the wheels. It'd be awesome to see someone like him, especially representing Argentina. It'd be really awesome to see him have a good run with the same. But realistically, I'm just not expecting that, unfortunately. I don't think he'll be a factor in contender any way, shape, or form. I think he's going to struggle a bit with that car. Don't trust the pace and speed of that equipment. I think Baltazar will not have a good run, but hopefully do a solid enough job, at least do an okay job behind the wheel this week at San Diego. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about St. Petersburg. Now, Bob Pockers reported earlier today on his Twitter and X pages, he reports that it sounds like St. Petersburg could be taking place on March 5th through 7th in 2027. This, of course, coincides with the IndyCar opener for St. Petersburg and the IndyCar opener for 2027. Now, why is this a big deal on the NASCAR front? Well, there's been, of course, a lot of talk about NASCAR also potentially coming back and racing at St. Petersburg in 2027. We all remember how great the racing was in 2026. This year, we saw a phenomenal race, and I think we all can agree when you compare the races for IndyCar and you look at the truck race, the truck race is better than the IndyCar race. The racing was so much better. He had a really awesome and great finish. And while fans were not a big fan of the sage yells, which I entirely agree, I think the sage yells need to go away overall in general. I think that St. Petersburg definitely needs the NASCAR thing. I know they're not going to be the main event because IndyCar is obviously going to be the main event, which I think everyone can be okay with. But I think St. Petersburg down the road on the NASCAR schedule, if they somehow fumble the bag of getting Chicago back on the calendar next year, I think it would make a lot of sense to have St. Petersburg be a potential replacement for the street race, because I think the racing there would absolutely be fantastic and incredible. Now, Fox did at the broadcast that I have no trust in Fox covering a road course race with how bad they cover Watkins Glen. Let's be honest with ourselves. But I do think it's certainly interesting, and we'll have to wait and see when the schedule does come out. IndyCar usually releases their schedule later in the year and later in the season, kind of around that September range is when they usually release it, so probably find out in a couple months from now. Nonetheless, we'll have to wait and see what happens with St. Petersburg and what happens when they officially announce the day for the future of St. Petersburg on the IndyCar and potentially NASCAR calendar as well for 2027 pretty soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about NASCAR 26. As Joseph Stigley reported earlier today or yesterday that the cover athlete for NASCAR 26 is expected to be revealed tomorrow, June 18th. It will be revealed sometime in the middle of the late afternoon, a day before drivers will get on the track for the Truck Series race out of San Diego. Can't remember if it's going to be happening out of San Diego they're going to be revealing it, or if they're going to be revealing it out in Charlotte, North Carolina, where a lot of the things end up taking place in the NASCAR industry. This is a really big deal because we haven't had like any dev diaries for NASCAR 26 up to this point, and we haven't heard a ton of things. We do know, we covered this a couple days back, we do know they've been working on the game behind the scenes, but they haven't really been teasing exactly what new features are going to be coming into play. Now, talking about things in regards to the cover athlete, a lot of people are theorizing it's either going to be Tyler Reddick or Denny Hamlin who's going to be the cover athlete. That would make the most sense for sure to me because they've been the two best drivers all year long. I did also see a leak of someone saying Chase Elliott might be on the cover. I will say, take some of the leaks with a grain of salt, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tyler Reddick or Denny Hamlin does end up being the cover athlete for NASCAR 26. As in regards to some other things involving NASCAR 26, there's some things to pay attention to. Obviously, I agree with this. I think Kyle Busch, if we do a Legends cover, you got to have Kyle Busch as the guy for the Golden Standard. I think him being on the cover would make the most sense here. In fact, I think it would be awesome if they would pay tribute to Kyle by having him as the main athlete on the cover for NASCAR 26. I think that would be great. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff still coming out in regards to NASCAR 26 in the future. Should be exciting to see what details do get revealed over time in the coming weeks and in coming months, because we'll probably hear about a date release, probably get official announcement for a date probably in the next couple days too. We usually got, I think last year we got around this time as well, so we'll see when the official release date comes up. Nonetheless, it's good to see the cover athlete is going to be revealed, and when that does get announced, we'll probably talk about it on the channel when it does end up getting officially announced and revealed. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Parker Kligerman. As it was officially confirmed yesterday that Parker Kligerman is back in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series this weekend at San Diego. He will drive the number 75 for Henderson Motorsports. Parker Kligerman has made 2 Craftsman Truck Series appearances so far in 2026. His first race happening at Texas Motor Speedway, where he actually had a really solid run, almost led a couple laps in the race in the event, and I believe scored a top 15 and nearly scored a top 10 finish in the number 25 car. He then made a second Truck Series appearance last week or 2 weeks ago at Michigan, where I believe Parker scored a top 20 finish and finished 16th. He stated at the time getting interviewed by Front Stretch he had 2 more Truck Series races scheduled for 2026. The rumors of this is going to be one of the races that he was going to enter this year, and now we know it's officially confirmed that Parker will be racing this weekend at San Diego. This is a really good opportunity for Parker Kligerman. I did picks earlier today on my channel, and I will say this, I think he has to be one of the odds-on favorites going in, not only because Parker has experience racing in street courses across the country, but has been racing IMSA recently, but Parker is going to be in a pretty solid truck. Henderson Motorsports, they historically have a really solid and really strong road course program and a really strong road course background, because remember Parker Kligerman did win a race in Mid-Ohio back in 2022. I do have a lot of faith that we're going to see that truck be up there. I don't think he's going to be the odds-on favorite to win, because I think guys like Justin Marks and Brendan Gaughan and Lane Riggs and Caden Honeycutt and Chandler Smith and Ty Majeski potentially and others that are at the top of their league, and like Connor Mosack as well, and Jay McMurray potentially all are going to be good. But I do think Parker will have a good truck. Not the best truck in the field, but Parker can get the best out of equipment, and it wouldn't surprise me if Parker does take Henderson Motorsports to victory lane. I think it's great to see him back in the truck series with this team. I think it's a great opportunity, a very solid opportunity. Excited to see how things go. We'll see how he ends up performing. Nonetheless, good to see that Parker will be driving for Henderson. I do expect him to have a solid truck and a good solid chance to get a really good finish out of the racetrack this weekend at San Diego. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Miles Rowe. There's been a lot of rumors and rumblings in regards to Miles Rowe over what he might be doing for 2027 because a lot of people have been seeing how well he's been doing in NEXT on the ovals. And according to reports, it sounds like Miles Rowe could be getting a test with Team Penske potentially at the end of the 2026 IndyCar year and could be looking at him for 2027. Potentially for the Indianapolis 500. This is, of course, reported by Marshall Pruitt. It needs to happen. We've seen how good this kid has been doing, especially on ovals. He was so strong at gateways. All of his wins so far in NEXT have come at ovals, and he's not a bad road racer on top of that. If you're like Team Penske or another organization like Abel, who may be looking to run the Indy 500 again next year, you want to get this kid behind the wheel because he's really, really talented. He's really strong in the ovals. It's crazy to me that they've still not figured out what's going on in regards to Miles Rowe because he's a part of the Team Penske group. It's pretty much confirmed at this point. He's part of the Team Penske group long-term going into the future. And I think it would be definitely a bad move if you don't get this kid the opportunity to test, which is why I'm glad to hear that they're looking at that currently at the moment for 2027, which I think absolutely does need to happen, him being full-time in IndyCar. So I think he'd do a really solid and really good job behind the wheel if he did, in fact, end up going full-time. So we'll see what happens for Miles. Nonetheless, glad to see that they're talking about it. Hope it happens because I think he's really talented. Or maybe down the road comes over to NASCAR, tries out some stock car stuff with Penske. But I think it's good to see that he will be looking to do a test with Penske potentially at the end of the IndyCar season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Reif. As it was confirmed earlier today, or yesterday, that Tyler Reif will drive the number 42 for Nice Motorsports this weekend in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race out at San Diego. Tyler Reif has made a few starts in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series so far this year. He's actually had some decent runs behind the wheel. I think he ran recently at St. Petersburg in the beginning of the year, but he scored a top 20 finish in that race. And in some of the other races this year, he has shown some really solid and really good speed behind the wheel. He, of course, I believe is an anchor driver for the 42 truck this season. It'll make more starts throughout the year. I will say when it comes to the Nice Motorsports team, they've had decent speed this year, especially when Ross Chastain has been behind the wheel, but they haven't, I believe, gone in a long time winless in a season in Truck Series competition. But I'm not sure Tyler Reif is going to be that guy who can go out there and snap the winless streak for the team. But development is something that is super important and seriously important. And you really want to see guys like this get the chance and opportunity to perform and do a really good job behind the wheel, especially with him only, I believe, being 19 years old or around that age currently at the moment. You want to see him develop and get really good. I hope he does a solid enough job behind the wheel this week at San Diego. Does have some racing experience at road course, I'm pretty sure. So I do think it's a solid and pretty good opportunity. We'll see how things go for him. Nonetheless, happy for him for sure. And glad to see that he's getting a chance and opportunity to race in the Craftsman Truck Series race this week at San Diego because I do think he's got a solid shot to potentially get a decent finish this weekend at the track out of San Diego. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about qualifying. Now, there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks about the qualifying metric that NASCAR uses currently at the moment right now. How NASCAR sets the qualifying metric, they go, I believe, like 55 to 60% of your recent finish. They go 25% by where you are in the standings. And they go, I believe, by 10% about how your fastest lap is. So usually this about 65%, they go by the recent finish. And there's been a lot of criticism recently toward that because drivers like Brad Keselowski have been affected by the metric. Because if you are lower in the finishing order from the previous week, you go out a lot earlier than a driver, let's say, that finishes really good in the race and the event. And there's been a lot of talk about this from reporters in the industry and others as well. I do think there actually is a very simple solution that really could fix a lot of these issues and problems. People mention a random draw. I think a random draw would definitely be one of the better ways to go about it. They used to do a random draw for a long time. I know Denny Hamlin would disagree with that, but basically, You can't basically have everybody start where they are because it's going to be very difficult to pass. Because back then it was a lot easier to pass with the old style of cars compared to the new style of cars currently at the moment. So what do you do to fix this issue? We go by point standings. I think that would be the simple solution. The driver sitting 35th in full-time points would end up going first. The open cars would go first if you have open cars. Then you basically go from 35th, and the last car to go out would be the first position. That'd be the way to do it, or by the owner's points. That's how I would do it at this point, because to me, that would be the simplest solution, because then you're not putting guys like Brad Keselowski out early. Your guys that should be going out early are going to go out earlier, and your guys that go out later are the higher in the point standings. They're going to have a better track and a better opportunity. And then on top of that, when it comes to practice, let's combine a practice session, have one 50-minute practice session, or two if you want to, instead of basically doing two groups, because that's another thing that's really confusing for a lot of people. They don't really like the groups, because why is it that O'Reilly gets to do one 50-minute session, but Cup doesn't do that? It doesn't make sense to me. It would make a lot of sense to simplify it at this particular point. One round, go by points to qualify. Don't go by the metric anymore. The metric should be points. That's how it should be overall, and I think that's what I hope they do, because I think it would make the most sense in regards to getting the situation with qualifying fixed, because right now I think the way they're doing it is not the most perfect way, and I think they certainly could do a little bit better job when it comes to formatting some of this stuff overall, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the O'Reilly Pocono ratings from this past weekend. And honestly, they are pretty good. As reported by the CW earlier tonight, that the CW says they averaged 1.11 million viewers at Pocono Raceway for 2025. Despite being an off week for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series the prior week, they're still up 28% from this race that happened in 2025, which is at Mexico City. It needs to be noted this race also is up from the Pocono race in 2026. 25. Yes, of course, this race is 2 weeks earlier than 1 or 2 weeks earlier than when Pocono was last year, but there really wasn't a massive and major difference at that particular point. That also is 17 consecutive O'Reilly Auto Parts Series races that at least 1 million average viewers in a race in 2026. They didn't count the race, of course, in Charlotte because of delays, but a race that's been non-delayed, 17 consecutive non-delayed races that have been able to at least get 1 million viewers per average race. I think that's really awesome. Shows the consistency of the O'Reilly Series being on the same network every single week is really helping out the O'Reilly Series currently at the moment when it comes to TV ratings. And I think that's something long-term that NASCAR needs to be looking at. That's why I think if NASCAR was on Prime all the time for the Cup Series, their ratings actually would go up a lot more. And starting them earlier on top of that would actually help a bit as well. I think these later start times, something we do need to have a conversation about, because I think a lot of people would agree. I think the earlier the race starts, I know when they really focus on the later start times because of the fact that they get better ratings, but if you're not up by 10 in the morning, they really probably shouldn't be getting up to watch a race. That's just my take on it, but I will say in regards to the ratings, they could definitely be, they're good for O'Reilly. They've been consistent, having over 1 million on average per race. Consistency plays a role, and the racing product and the broadcast plays a role in the broadcast growing, because if you have a good broadcast, even if the racing isn't the greatest in the world, you're going to get people that are just generally going to tune in, and they're going to be really excited about it no matter what. So I think it's really good to see the O'Reilly Series continue to grow in ratings every single year. It's been fun watching it with the CW, how they've broadcasted it, so I'm happy to see that, and good to see at least 1 million people were able to tune in. Pretty awesome. We had a good average viewership for this weekend at Pocono for the O'Reilly Series when it comes to the TV ratings. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the Race Team Alliance. As was reported by Adam Stern a little bit before I recorded this video, that the Race Team Alliance has officially hired Tori Galita, the former president of Richard Childress Racing, as new chairman of the board, replacing Rob Kaufman. In addition to that, he reports that Denny Hamlin now is on the board of directors for the Race Team Alliance. Let's break this down really quickly, beginning with the former RCR president, Tori Galita. Tori Galita did a really good job over the years at Richard Childress Racing. Even during the time RCR has been down at points, he was with that organization for a long time and for many, many years. And I will say during the time he was president of the group, I think which was around the time Tyler Reddick was over there, that team actually was performing on a really solid level. Since that time he's left, I feel like RCR has been on a little bit of a decline in their performance, and they haven't been as strong in the last couple of years. going into the Race Team Alliance and taking over for Rob Coffin. I have a lot more excitement for the future of the Race Team Alliance currently at the moment, but I would have had with Rob Coffin running, because Rob Coffin basically created it, basically kind of saved himself for this stuff to happen at Spingate back in 2013. So I think someone like Tori Galita coming in, I think that's definitely a big step in the right direction for the future of the Race Team Alliance. The other interesting point is Denny Hamlin now being on the board of directors. I think that actually is a really cool thing that he's now on the board of directors for. I know some are not going to like that the driver's part of it, but I think you need someone active in the sport being involved with the board of directors, especially with, the RTA being on Denny Hamlin's side throughout the trial and throughout the lawsuit from time to time. I think that a lot of people really would have liked to see Denny Hamlin be part of that and be part of that group, which also pretty much confirms that 25 Racing long-term is going to be part of the board of directors and part of that group for the long-term and the foreseeable as well, which I think for some people is generally a really, really good thing to have an active driver be involved. It's going to be interesting to see everything else that comes out. I'm interested to see who else is on that board of directors going forward, whether it is just Denny Hamlin going in or Tori Galita going in. I think you need to have more drivers being involved and owners being involved. So I maybe down the road, because I think Rick Hendrick's involved in some way, shape, or form with the group. I think Roger Penske's also part of the RTA a little bit. And a lot of these people are part of things like the Race Team Alliance, the RTA. I think it's interesting for sure. Pretty cool stuff, though, to see Hamlin getting involved in that. I know some are not the biggest fan of the RTA, but I think there needs to be better decisions. Hopefully down the road, maybe Hamlin coming in and get better decisions for the sport. Adding more practice, I think that's one thing we need to be looking towards, because I think that would help a lot of these younger drivers, especially, and allow more testing in the future. So I think that would fix a lot of issues on that front. Nonetheless, interesting for sure that Denny Hamlin is now on the board of directors for the RTA. That's kind of a big deal in regards to something like that, with him being involved in something as big as that overall, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the Joe Gibbs Racing and Inspire Motorsports lawsuit. Now, there's been a little of an update in regards to that lawsuit over the course of the last couple days. As it was reported by Matt Weaver yesterday, he reports apparently a former or current Spire employee had informed a Joe Gibbs Racing employee that Chris Gabehart was apparently in the competition process around the November to December time, when this all was starting to go down at that particular point. And apparently Chris Gabehart, according to this, was actually allowed in the shop, which broke the contract agreement that Chris Gabehart had, which I think is very interesting. Now, it does need to be noted, though, that it's come after the court process that apparently Chris Gabehart was let go from Joe Gibbs Racing in early November. So if he's basically in, and I know there's a non-compete process and thing that they have, but basically, if he's been fired from the team, I don't know why there's a non-compete agreement that's allowed. I think especially if you're fired from an organization, you probably should be allowed to go and at least look in a shop, especially if you're good friends with Jeff Dickerson. I feel like that this is a little bit of a petty side. And then I always say they were critical of the role he has against the chief operating officer. They continue trying to claim but basically, that's a competition role, which I don't really know how that entails a competition role. If you ask me overall, I just don't understand how that really goes into the side of Joe Gibbs Racing. The big thing we're still waiting for, though, in regards to this lawsuit, is do they have the burden of proof to show that they took the information? They're basically saying that they actually have proof from someone from Joe Gibbs Racing that they did take some information from JGR and have been using it. How so? You guys have been looking all through the discovery process for months, and we have not seen anything at this point. And they've defended it multiple times. Now, Jeff Dickerson going on a live stream defending it, probably not the smartest move on his part, if you ask me. But I think in regards to stuff like this, I don't know, just to me, when I look at stuff like this, I feel like this is Joe Gibbs Racing being a little bit petty, and them saying, oh, they've only been getting better speed because they've been fast in this year. They've been growing their speed the last year or so. Carson Osbar and Suarez, yes, have been good this year, but Osbar was a top 10 consistent guy a lot of weeks last year. If not for mechanical issues, Carson Osbar would have had a better average. Some people would disagree with me on that, but that's absolutely the truth. Nonetheless, it'll be interesting. I think things are going to get a lot more spicier. The trial is set for January of next year, and as we progress through the rest of this trial unless they settle it, which they're going through the discovery process right now. It's probably going to get more spicy. More information is probably going to come out. Nonetheless, I think some of the information coming out from their side at this particular point, I don't entirely agree with it, and I think there's ways they could have handled a little bit better on their side when it comes to that situation, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about San Diego. Now, there's been some huge updates in regards to the San Diego NASCAR weekend over the course of the last couple of days. Obviously, this weekend is one of the most anticipated and biggest events in NASCAR history, with all three series racing on nail-based Coronado, which is only going to be 2 days from today as a matter of fact. Now, I believe it was reported on Monday the track is nearly done at this point. I think they said it was 98% complete in one section, 95% complete in another. They started actually building the track only about 2 weeks ago on June 1st. We're on June 19th or 16th at this point when I'm recording this, and they should have the track pretty much ready to go from that particular point. The alternate start finish line is something that is going to be coming back for qualifying, which again, they've been using that for the bigger ovals and also for the road courses this year like Dakota and Watkins Glen. They don't want drivers impeding. That's one of the reasons why they brought the alternate start finish lines for years. Drivers are getting affected by that, and I think NASCAR made a great decision to find a way to add the alternate start finish line. One big thing is the caution periods. We talk about length of the track and all this stuff, but one thing I want to focus on is caution periods. Because with how big this track is, being a 3.4 mile track or something along those lines, being the largest track in NASCAR right now, or the longest track, they want to speed. There have been a lot of talk about how long the cautions are going to be. NASCAR is planning to have the caution periods be sped up very quickly and get them done as quick as possible. One, while darkness may not be a major issue, you don't want to run into potential issues like that. Secondly, it's a good decision. They're going to speed that up, and it's something that I've been saying for a while. It's not just an issue at the road courses. It's an issue on every type of track. My counter-argument against that, though, is just get rid for this weekend of the sage yellows and let the race play out naturally, because that's one of the issues. You're basically having cautions with sages. A lot of the yellows last time we were at like Watkins Glen came out for sages. I think there were only 2 cautions not for sage yellows, and it was for a 10 on the racetrack, and then the Ryan Blaney or the Logano having the flat tire at Watkins Glen. They didn't throw the caution for Cody Ware, though, which I'm a little concerned about. They have an issue like that. But the big thing they can do is get rid of the sage yells and get rid of the sage cautions, because that's going to be a big thing that is going to speed up the process of this yells. That's the thing that's going to speed it up a lot more than what they're trying to do at this point. I get what they're doing, but get rid of the sage yells. That will fix your issues. Nonetheless, some interesting tidbits for San Diego. They'll probably reveal more information in the coming days. They had a big presser earlier today. But I'm excited for the race, looking forward to the event, just hoping they can speed up the caution periods, because that's something I think they're going to have to work on going into the race, how long the track is. I think hopefully they will do that for the event coming up at San Diego. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. As it was announced earlier today, Shane Van Gisbergen will be back in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series next weekend at Sonoma Raceway. He will drive the number 9 for Junior Motorsports. This will be the third start that Shane Van Gisbergen will have made in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series so far this year. He is 1 for 2 so far this year on road courses. In the first race earlier this year, Circuit Americas, he picked up the win and victory the first time he's won in any series at Circuit Americas, including the Cup Series. Then at Watkins Glen, he had a really strong car in the race, had a bad pit stop that took him out of contention, got some damage on pit road thanks to contact from Connor Zilisch on pit road, and he ended up finishing, I believe, around 8th or 9th position when he probably should have been contending for the win with Brent Cruz struggles and Zilisch and Love almost wrecking at one point, though. If they had a better pit stop, he would have been a lot closer at that point to Connor Zilisch, because he was running Zilisch down on the longer run. For this race, we're not sure what's going on with Zilisch. We do believe that Zilisch will be in the 1 car next weekend. I think it's been reported that Carson Cleveland has 2 more races scheduled, not in the 1. I believe it's this week at Sonoma, next week at Chicagoland. Then he'll be back in that car after Chicagoland, which I believe Zilisch will be the driver in the next 2 events at Sonoma and Chicagoland. I think SVG has a really strong chance to win the race at Sonoma, but like I've said multiple times, it is going to be really, really difficult to beat Connor Zilisch if he runs. Connor is so strong at the road courses. He's beat SVG more times than SVG has to be him. And last year, those two had a great deal. Both had really strong and really solid cars. But it was at the end of the day, after a great battle for the win, I think Connor probably had the upper hand advantage in the race and got the win. Now, obviously, the one car has been a little more consistent at times. It's something that could be a big concern for him compared to SVG, who's going to have a really solid car. I do expect that car to be really good because Junior Motorsports has won 11 out of the 17 races so far this season. But in regards to Shane, like I said, I do think that Shane is going to have a good opportunity. He's going to be one of the favorites going into this. I think he has a great shot to win Sonoma. I hope he gets to run an oval this year. I think running an oval definitely something that does make a lot of sense overall, and I really hope they do consider doing that for him, because I think he needs to run an oval race at this particular point. We'll see how things go for him in the near future. Nonetheless, a great opportunity for Shane. He'll be a factor to win, trying to get his second O'Reilly win. If his third overall wins, he does have a cup win at Sonoma. I think Shane will have a shot and opportunity to potentially score the win when we do get out to Sonoma next week in both the O'Reilly and the Cup Series races in about a week or so from now, which will also be the first race for TNT this year. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Brexton Busch and Samantha Busch. Now, a night or so ago, Brexton Busch put out a little bit of an Instagram post talking about his late model race that he made, the first late model race that he had made since the unfortunate passing of his father, Kyle Busch. Drove the number 18 car at Hickory Motor Speedway and did a really good job behind the wheel. He tried to catch top two from what he said, but came up short in his third ever late model race to scoring his first ever late model win and victory. First of all, Brexton racing in a very difficult time. I think that's very inspiring to see, because of course the Busch family has been going through a very tragic and very difficult time. But I have a ton of respect for Brexton holding his straw, standing next to his mother when they were honoring him about a month ago, which has almost been a month since the unfortunate passing of his father, Kyle. I think that is something that's remarkable, that he can be strong through a very difficult and a very tragic time. But I think he did a really good job finishing third. I think he's running the summer shootout tomorrow, I'm pretty sure, or tonight, I should say. Hope he's able to win that. That'd be awesome if he could end up winning the race, the summer shootout Legends car races, because he was really strong, finishing 6th and 2nd in the races last week. I think it's admirable that he's going out there and racing. The other thing is Samantha Busch basically did release another statement earlier today. We kind of talked about it on the channel. She talked about basically a rainbow showing up in front of sandals that were owned by Kyle Busch, and also talked about being in a church and dove flying right next to Samantha and being there throughout the church service, being there. You know, reading that statement, I know, I feel terrible for the Busch family. Obviously, been a very difficult time for not just Samantha, Brexton, and Lennox, but also for Tom, Gay, and Kurt. We're all thinking about the Busch family right now, and we're going to continue remembering the Kyle Busch for all the iconic moments he had in his motorsports career, because I do think that he brought a lot to the table in NASCAR, Kyle did. And it just doesn't feel real. It's just a very sad, and it's just an awful situation overall. Like, we all are grieving even almost a month later, and it's just something I don't think anyone should ever have to go through. 41 years old is too young. I mean, myself, I'm only 15 years younger than 41, and it is a big concern for me, you know, and it's just a sad, difficult time for the Busch family. Been a really tough and tragic moment for the family at this time. Again, continue to send my thoughts and condolences out to the Busch family during a difficult time. It's on her Instagram page. Go and check out the post. I think it was a great thing that she posted, and we're all thinking about the Busch family right now, currently at this moment through a very difficult and tragic time, and everyone involved in the Busch family as well. Now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, in recent weeks, we've talked a lot about Denny Hamlin and his future in the sport. Obviously, Denny Hamlin right now, we know, has been on a roll in the NASCAR Cup Series so far in the 2026 season, where Denny Hamlin's coming off of winning 3 straight NASCAR Cup Series races. But back at the end of last year, basically, Denny Hamlin signed a contract extension with Joe Gibbs Racing to the 2027 year. And as far as we know, multiple times, Denny Hamlin has stated that he may retire at the end of the 2027 year. But it seems like there's been some talk behind the scenes. Maybe Denny Hamlin could postpone that in the future, depending on what the performance looks like for Joe Gibbs Racing with him, and also, of course, what happens to the development of Brent Cruz. Heather Gibbs, who is one of the co-owners of Joe Gibbs Racing, spoke to me after Denny Hamlin picked up his third straight NASCAR Cup Series win, and basically, Joe Gibbs Racing wants to try to convince Denny Hamlin at this point to stay with the team and program after the 2027 year. Now, it is worth noting that Denny Hamlin has said this multiple times, that if he said this, I think, last week in Michigan as well, that he's still not 1,000% definitive, or whatever it is, basically confirm what he'll officially be doing after 2027. Many people like myself think that 2027 is going to be the last year for Denny Hamlin in the NASCAR Cup Series, because one, I do think, even though Denny Hamlin's performing at a super impressive and a strong level, I do think that age cliff is coming in the not-so-distant future, though I might be proven wrong, and it's going to happen, because I thought going into this year he wasn't going to be as good as all the things that happened behind the scenes with the unfortunate passing of his father and other stuff that happened. I just didn't know if Hamlin was going to perform at a super good level. He said he was not really in it at the beginning of the year. He's been in it this year, and he's the early favorite to win the championship. Now, some have asked whether Hamlin will basically retire after he wins if he wins the championship this year, whether he'll retire. Denny Hamlin has already told multiple people like Dale Jr. that he's not planning to retire if he does win the championship this year, because he does have contracts with his team he has to go through. So that's one thing to keep in mind in regards to Hamlin. For Denny Hamlin, though, I would not be surprised if he sticks around to 2028. Now, I think a lot of it depends on Brent Cruz, his development. Brent Cruz has been doing an incredible job in the O'Reilly Series this year. He's the odds-on favorite to win the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at San Diego, with how well he ran at Watkins Glen, and with both Connor Zolch and Shane Van Gisbergen not allowed to run the O'Reilly race due to the restrictions and the requirements of that series, with it being the first time they've ran there. They were not allowed to see any of those guys go in. Brent Cruz is probably going to have a good shot of winning. By this time next year, Brent Cruz is only going to become a much better and a much stronger driver in the series. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Denny Hamlin after 2027. He does come back next year. I think the big thing to watch for is how quickly Brent Cruz develops. I think that's a big thing to keep an eye on, because if he does develop really quickly, that being Brent, I wouldn't be surprised if Hamlin does retire. If Hamlin continues performing at the level he's been performing, there could be a good chance possibly that Denny Hamlin could somehow retire, though he's been really good at this point, so I'm not sure if Hamlin is going to retire. Nonetheless, I've been so impressed with the speed that Hamlin's had at the age of 45 going into the age 48 year. He's been doing an incredible job this year, and it's been a phenomenal year. But if Hamlin does retire at the end of next year, he will end up being replaced by Brent Cruz, because Brent Cruz is a guy who's being developed as the next big thing, and Hamlin doesn't want to get in the way of that development at this point. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Chris Buescher. Now, we covered this story on the channel earlier today. It was officially announced and confirmed earlier today, or yesterday when you're watching this video, that Chris Buescher has officially signed a multi-year contract extension with RFK Racing, and he will return to RFK Racing for the 2027 year. This is a major silly season domino that has fallen, because there was some outside chatter and some outside speculation from people like Jordan Bianchi that potentially he's been looked at by multiple teams outside of the RFK Racing stable. One team that many people speculate is the Team Penske Group. Obviously, the two-car had not had anything signed for the year, and I had heard Penske was a team that was actually looking at him. There's another team from the Toyota side of things that was interested in him, and I imagine Legacy Motor Club was that team that was looking at him for 2027. But this is definitely a really big deal, and this move to me makes a lot of sense in a lot of big ways. Number one, you keep the best driver in your organization around. Chris Buescher, since 2020, has been the best driver in RFK. Since 2020, Chris Buescher has gone on to win, I believe, 5 of his 6 races in that span. He's had 6 career wins in Cup. 5 of those 6 wins have come with the RFK Racing team. You combine that with the other drivers in the history of RFK, no one else has more than 1 win, and that being Brad Keselowski, the owner of the team and program. That Buescher and Brad probably should have more wins at this point with the speed the RFK cars have shown in the last year. And in a year where Ford has definitely struggled this year, you can definitely tell that Ford's have been a little bit off this year with the performance in speed. Buescher is one of the 2 guys in the Ford camp that's been solid. The other one, of course, being Ryan Blaney. Buescher sitting 8th in the points, and Ryan Blaney sitting 4th. You compare that to the other Fords, the third highest Ford, I actually think is Joey Logano or Austin Cindric, who's sitting 16th in the points right now. Then Joey Logano, Ryan Preece, Brad Keselowski, others are outside. None of the front row cars are even close at this point, and all the other Fords have been struggling a lot this year. And even Josh Berry, who we're not even sure what's going on with him at this point. There's some rumors around him we'll talk about here in just a little bit. He's going to be out of a ride for another young driver that we'll talk about here in a minute. For Chris Buescher, though, again, I think this is the best option that Buescher had. He's been doing a really good job with this team, and they've talked about this, but Ford, like I said, has been down on power this year. You can definitely tell he's been struggling a lot for speed, but Buescher's been one of those guys that absolutely has been one of the guys that have been outperforming that equipment. He's one of the most criminally underrated drivers in NASCAR today, which is why there's a lot of teams that have been interested in Buescher, but I think him sticking around absolutely makes a lot of sense for the team and program. So I'm really happy that Chris is not going anywhere and won't be leaving the team anytime soon. With Chris Buescher off the market, that does change things for silly season, because that was a domino that definitely needed to fall for silly season at this point on the NASCAR Cup side of things. Obviously, RFK Racing, there's still some questions on what's going on with the other two drivers. Brad Keselowski, the owner of the team. I would expect that Brad Keselowski is more than likely going to return. I mean, Brad has stated multiple times his long-term goal is to end up making it to having, basically getting at least 800 career NASCAR Cup Series starts. I think he's close to 600 career starts in Cup at this point. He wants to race, so he's almost 50 at this point, and Brad's been doing a really awesome and good job in recent years, and he's had a career resurgence with the RFK Racing team. So more than likely, I do think that Brad won't be going anywhere. Even if they can't find a charter, Brad isn't planning to change things at this point. As for Ryan Preece, the big question is what is going to happen with that third charter at this point, whether they're going to be able to keep that charter after the 2027 year. I know they want to keep him in the team and program because they do like Ryan Preece over there. I know Preece has been struggling in recent weeks, but I think that's more of an issue of Ford than it is Ryan Preece's capabilities, because we see what Preece can do when he has good equipment. If you give him good opportunities and good equipment, like we saw like at the Clash, for instance, he can have a great chance and opportunity to competing for wins and victories, which is why I think that they're not going to change anything over their RFK at this point, and they stated that multiple times, even if they can't find a third charter. Though they are definitely running out of time to find that third charter at this point, as we do progress to the middle of June at this point, and charter sales are probably going to be difficult unless Haas, which there is a team apparently interested in selling a charter. Many people are looking at the Haas factory team, maybe selling a charter. That would make sense. Aaron Kramer was a former engineer over at RFK Racing. I know people mentioned Hayek, but Hayek's not changing anything for next year, and it looks like that we're kind of seeing moves happen. With Chris Buescher being off the market, that 7 drivers pretty much already confirmed with extensions for next year. And so other moves that have happened up to this point. Larson signed an extension with Hendrick. Hocevar signed an extension with Spire Motorsports. Ryan Blaney signed an extension with Penske. Tyler Reddick not going anywhere. He's leaving. He's not leaving 2311 anytime soon. John Nemechek is expected to stay with Legacy Motor Club next year. Then he got this move with Buescher returning to RFK. Senna staying with Hayek Motorsports. And then Corey Heim going full-time Cup racing. And then, of course, there's some other questions, which we're going to get to here in just a short little bit in regards to silly season. But I'm glad to see Chris Buescher isn't leaving anytime soon. He's going to be there for multiple years, not just for 2027. Sounds like a deal may go through 28 or 29, which Buescher will be in his mid to upper 30s at the moment. I believe Chris Buescher's 33 to 34 at this point, so he's a little bit older at this point. One of the drivers will be in the older side in the near future, but Buescher is a talented enough guy who can win a lot of races, one of the most underrated guys, good road racer, among other things. Buescher is not going anywhere. He will be staying with RFK Racing for another year and will stay in the number 17 car, be off the silly season market, at least for a little bit at this point. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are talking a little bit about a silly season. Now, we already talked about the fact that Chris Buescher is off the market for silly season for 2027. But there are still some unknown questions in regards to silly season on the Cup side and the lower series side for 2027. Let's first begin by one of the most obvious ones, and that is none other than Jesse Love. There is a lot of talk about the 21 car. Obviously, Josh Reed, we know, will not be returning to the Wood Brothers organization in 2027. The name that continues to be linked heavily to the number 21 car for next year is none other than Jesse Love. Jesse Love was supposed to make some more starts at RCR in the Cup Series this year, but obviously, of course, he's not been making any Cup starts in that number 33, and we know Austin will be in that 33 car for the remainder of the 2026 year, and even though he may not be back in that car for Cup next year at this point. So where does Jesse Love go? He at one point been linked to Legacy Motor Club, but I do think Jesse Love, he's the odds-on favorite for the 21 car. And why would he be the favorite for the 21 of the Wood Brothers? It's obvious. It's not just about the Wood Brothers. It's none other than Team Penske, which leads to another crazy rumor. TJ Majors and Dale Jr. were talking about the rumor around Jesse Love, and there's actually been apparently some rumors and conversation about Austin Cindric maybe getting moved over to the 21 next year, and Jesse Love going fully into the Penske group for 2027. Jesse Love in a Penske car would be very interesting, but I'll be honest, I think Jeslo would be fun to see what he can do to Penske car, and I think he'd be fun to go there. Now, the Wood Brothers would definitely be a stepping stone, so I think for Cindric it would be a prove year, because Cindric has been in that 2 car now for basically 4 or 5 years. And I'll be real and honest, while this year's been a decent year for Cindric, I feel like that he hasn't really done amazing in Cup competition at this point. He hasn't really set the world on fire like he did in the O'Reilly Series yet, though I think he's been better in Logano a lot of this year so far. But for Jesse Love, he's been heavily linked over to that 21 car. I think he's going to be the odds-on favorite, and we're probably going to find out if he'll be going there very soon in the near and not-so-distant future, if he'll be in the 21, but it sounds like he's a favorite at this point for the 21. Others have mentioned for the seat, like Lane Riggs and Noah Gragson, and I know that others like Ryan Preece was mentioned at one point, but I don't, and Gillen's mentioned at one point, but I would think Jess Love is going to get that seat. Going to Alex Bowman real quick, there's been a lot of talk, of course, in recent months about Alex Bowman maybe now returning to Hendrick Motorsports. Not him basically getting let go of the team per se, but him retiring at the end of this year and maybe hanging up the helmet and handing the seat over to Corey Day or Connor Zilch. Kelly Crandall tried to argue with a lot of people on social media today about it seemed like, and I do agree with her to an extent that Bowman's ride is not unset because of his performance. I think a lot of it has to do with the health. I think it all right now comes down to what's going to happen with the health at this point of him, because that's the big concern with me is the health. It's not so much the performance, because I do think that it's not all Alex Bowman. I think Blake Harris has struggled as a crew chief this year. I mean, look at how much better the other 3 Hendrick cars are. Trust me, Alex Bowman's had a bad year. He is not as bad of a driver as what we have seen. He's a solid enough guy. He's won like 7 cup races, for crying out loud. It just feels like the 48 team is way off. If Bowman does not return or retires at the end of the year, Corey Day will likely be a replacement for him, though we could see Corey Day end up at Spire potentially next year if McDowell does not return to the 71 car next year. Going down to Noah Gragson real quick, there's a couple rumblings around Noah Gragson. A lot of speculation is that Noah Gragson may not be back at Front Row Motorsports next year. If Noah Gragson does not return to Front Row, Dale Jr. kind of talked about this. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of chatter about Noah Gragson potentially going over to RCR next year. There was a rumor a couple years back, if you all forget, basically there was a lot of talk and a lot of conversation about Noah Gragson going over to RCR for 24. There was talk that RCR was going to purchase a 3rd charter because of the Bass Pro connection. So this is not the first time we've heard rumors about Noah Gragson going to Richard Childress Racing. I feel like those rumors have a lot of weight to them at this point, and I do think there's a very solid and a really good possibility that Noah Gragson may end up in an RCR car. I just feel like him in an RCR car being part of that mold would definitely make a ton of sense at this particular point, maybe being a 33. Yes, they would have a veteran driver, 2 younger but veteranish drivers in the team, with Austin Dillon being in his mid to upper 30s. Not sure how much longer Austin Dillon is going to be in Cup and racing full time, but Noah Gragson, there are some questions around him, what he'll be doing next year. If Noah Gragson doesn't return, it sounds like maybe Lane Riggs or even Josh Berry, who we'll get to in a sec, might be a candidate for the 4. Same with Front Row. It sounds like Todd Gillen, like Zane Smith, will be back with Front Row next year. Loves likes him, and Bob noted that today that Todd Gillen is expected to return to Front Row Motorsports next year, which makes a lot of sense. Todd's had some decent performances this year, I believe sitting in the top 25 in points. The second of the 3 drivers probably should be the best, with him being the veteran driver of that team, but I would expect that Todd Gillen will likely end up returning to the Front Row team next year and staying to 34. Moving on to Josh Berry, there's a lot of talk about what's going on with Josh Berry for 2027. Is he going to stay in Cup next year? He's been talked about the 4 for Front Row. There has been some talk about him going over to Front Row. He was rumored at one point in 2025 or 24 about being one of the Front Row drivers when the whole charter situation was going on. Berry's name was linked to that 4 car. He is being linked to the 4 for next year, but if I had to choose between Berry, Lane Riggs, and Chandler, I'm going to go Lane Riggs for that seat. So for Josh Berry, I look at either Junior Motorsports or maybe a trade. With Love being rumored to go to the Wood Brothers, why not put Josh Berry in the number 2 for Richard Childress Racing? That car is fully funded, and it would make a lot of sense that be a championship caliber seat. So I think for Berry, there's other questions. Does Junior Motorsports end up having a Cup team in the future? I think that's something that certainly could be a question in the future right now. But I think Josh Berry, there are some questions if he will have a Cup right next year or if he'll stay in Cup after this season. Talk about lower series stuff. Cletus Farm, there's rumors about him going full-time in ARCA Menards competition. I mean, there has, of course, been some talk and conversations about others like Nick Sanchez, we know is part of the Peterson Racing Group at this point. Whether he'll be part of that team for more race outs than the ones he's going to run this determined. Maybe he becomes a candidate for RCR. Maybe you see Carson Brown go full-time. And I think the lower series, we're about to start seeing some movement in that as well as we progress throughout the remainder of the silly season. Drivers maybe that could be getting better rides like Parker Restov. It could be with Sam Hunt, and maybe Harrison Burton goes Cup racing in the future. And there could be some other stuff as well. Then JGR, there's some other big stuff going on with that team and program. It'll be interesting to see how silly season plays out. But the big thing is Jesse Love, and I do think there's a good chance Jesse Love may end up being a full-time Cup driver next year and probably going to the Wood Brothers most likely next season. So, that's for today's Lawn NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What are thoughts about Jesse Love likely going to the Wood Brothers next year? Let me know your thoughts in comments below. And how you feel about Chris Buescher return to RFK Racing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any other major news or breaks later today, we'll discuss it live on the channel. We're also going to have a O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race fix coming out for San Diego. Then tomorrow we'll have Cup race fix for San Diego and potentially a paint scheme video dropping. And then on Friday we'll have the truck review for San Diego. We'll also maybe have qualifying reactions and a news video. And then of course on Saturday reactions, the O'Reilly race Cup qualified. And we'll also talk about some other stuff from Saturday as well. Then Sunday, we're going to have the starting lineup video. Then maybe a Shane Van Gisbergen review. He's probably going to win the race San Diego, let's be honest. And then, of course, on Monday, we should have a news video dropping as we head to the first in-season tournament race. And we head to Sonoma as well. Got a lot of content coming up. People like Haley D and Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Charlie Creed, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Cletus Barn Dodger, Antonio Sturcase, Ken Biffle, Brian Kozlowski, Corey Heim, Carl Joy, Nick Sanchez, Ross Chastain, Daniel Dye. Others like Kevin Harvick, Clint Boyer, Braxton Busch, Samantha Busch, others like that, Corey Heim, all that good stuff. We'll talk about a lot of things on the channel in coming days and weeks as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.